Okay, everybody, welcome to the second chat with Rob and Dave. As you do, so we're a couple of chaps exploring consciousness, time, relativity, spirituality, as you do on a Thursday afternoon. So, so my name's Dave. This is Rob.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody. You might have seen the video that we did before. So today we're talking about time, essentially, and the concepts around time and consciousness, and it will lead on to lots of other things. So, so where should we start?
Well, I think let's jump right in. And
Yeah,
I think one of the most revolutionary concepts, which I know is held within the scientific community now and is a more general idea generally, but that linear time is an illusion, I suppose, and that everything occurs simultaneously from the present moment, which is a pretty mind-blowing idea, because we are so completely hypnotized by physical reality and cause and effect. From birth to death, we see the progression, we see aging, we see all of these things around us, and we just take it for granted that linear time is where it's at. Yeah. And of course, in what Seth would call the camouflage reality, which is physical reality which we live, it is what appears to be going on. But I think the understanding that there is actually time is simultaneous is an incredibly important concept.
Yeah, I mean, even it's yeah, and that's a great introduction, but it's almost like we're so embedded in it, aren't we? It's like we think we're going to have dinner in at 6 o'clock, and that we got up at 4 o'clock, and that because I did this happens, and that type of thing. We're absolutely embedded in the idea of time. And I suppose the most interesting thing is that science is now, I said to you before we started, didn't I? I Googled about quantum physics and time and this type of thing. And it's mind-blowing that even those conversations are having, because it's going to lead on to what we might lead on to, which is the idea of a multiverse and simultaneous realities and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so the basic idea, basic in inverted commas, that we're exploring is that time, in fact, is created by our brain, that it has no real reality, it has no real rock bed reality, and that events are not linear, although they appear to be. And yeah, and that's such a, I mean, imagine if that was taught in school, and that type of thing. I mean, what would be different? It's just amazing. Yeah. So that's what we're exploring today. So what do you have an experience of exploring this type of thing? How long have you been playing around with the idea of no time or simultaneous time?
I think the original idea I've known about for a long time, and my practical application of it has to do with another interesting idea, which is the theory of probabilities, which means that in a way, past and present, or seeming past and present, there are multiple, in fact, an infinitesimal amount of futures and pasts and presents, and therefore you're not at the mercy of your past. It's certainly not at the mercy of karma, because it doesn't exist. It can't.
So let's stop there. So that's so we've kind of gone on quite a few subjects. I mean, karma is such. It's almost like an everyday language, isn't it? And I think a lot of people don't use it in the kind of spiritual term. It's just like, if I watch a video on TV of somebody tripping somebody up, and then 2 seconds later they fall flat on their face, everyone goes, oh, that's karma, but of course, in the terms that we're talking about it, karma plays a huge role in people's acceptance of what their life is about. Do you know what I mean? So I've met people when I'm exploring this type of thing that have really struggled, and the reason that they think they struggled is because they go, oh, it's my karma. In a past life, I had loads of money, and in this life I'm absolutely, poor as a rat, and that's the reason. You know what I mean? So we blame karma on such on big events like a whole lifetime, but also small events as well. So just to wipe that out, it's a really challenging subject for a lot of people. So some people might be listening who have based a lot of their life on the idea of karma. And the fact is, as you say quite rightly, karma does not exist. It's which for some people is mind blowing in itself. Anyway, so yeah, and probability. So how would you explain probabilities?
Well, probabilities are, I think it's easier to think about it from the present to the future,
Okay.
because most of us don't know what's going to happen in our future, but there are many probabilities in the future. So bringing it back to reality creation and belief work and taking conscious responsibility for our creation, we in the present, because of our beliefs, have a range of probabilities out there in the so-called future. And I keep on wanting to say so-called so that we don't
do this. I do this all the time when it just
so-called
so-called
the so-called future. And I think it works. I mean, just a recent thing that happened to me was that my car broke down, and I realized that there were quite a few probabilities as to the outcome of this situation. Now, I noticed that I was thinking about some not terribly positive probabilities, and what I did was, after a while, I thought, now what is it that I want to happen? What I want is that the car is repaired and I return home safely and easily.
Yeah.
And that's the probability that I wanted to link in with. So
just to hold you there, because this is the subject. So because, and we could transpose that for a car breaking down or an event or going out of your house, choosing something or whatever. So the idea is that people are generally familiar, probably watching this, with this idea of that your thoughts create your own reality, that your thoughts attract events. So your car breaks down, and the extension that we're talking about is that there is a reality where you go home safely and it's all absolutely brilliant. There is a probability where they don't have your part for a week and you've got to sit by the side of the road or whatever it is. There's another probability where they have the part, but it's a day, and it's not, and it doesn't quite work out properly. So from that one moment point, there are almost in our terms, limitless probabilities that could happen. And the power of a conscious creator is to choose the probability you want out of that range of probabilities. Yeah?
Exactly. Very well put. Much better put than actually I was.
No, it's good. Because I think if we can just unpick it.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, so it's like having a range of probabilities that could, so for example, it's not possibilities. So it wasn't possible for your car to break down, because you're in Ireland, aren't you? Your car to break down on the motorway, and for your car to immediately transport itself to Bali. And do you know what I mean? That's not a probability. That's not what happens in physical reality. So in practical terms, it's from that moment point, what are the probable events that could happen? So that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
And I think the other important thing to remember is that you're not actually trying to change anything.
Yeah, that's
what you're trying to do is to link into something that has already, because of simultaneous time, already happened and already resolved. So you're just, and of course it needs to play out within linear time because we live within linear time, but all of those probabilities and the outcomes exist in what is known as the spacious present. So what I did in this particular situation, I used my imagination, I used expectation, and I used a very strong visualization to imagine myself walking in the door back home, saying to my wife, the car got fixed and it was all great. And this is actually what happened. I did, and I walked through that door, so that I drew that probability into my life. Now, what I also did was, which is another thing that I often do, is when I got back home, I sent energy back to my past self,
Yeah.
inverted commas, so that self would relax enough to know that it was all going to work out.
Okay, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop you there, right? Okay, so these are once you. I mean, if you're watching this and you're kind of going, "What on earth is talking about here?" These are all logical steps. Once you begin to break down the idea that time is a construct of our physical mind, it's not sequential. And the real nugget there that I wanted to bring out, and this was a real moment for me when I kind of cottoned onto this, if you like, is you're not trying to create anything new per se. You know, you're not trying to force a reality that doesn't already exist. You know what I mean? So it's almost, that's why it becomes effort, or it becomes less effortful, because and I think a lot of people think they have to create a brand new reality to, you know, that the reality doesn't exist of you walking back in, or but actually it does. So the goal becomes a bit like spokes on a wheel. You know, the center is the moment point. All these others are real already. What you are doing, and the role of a conscious creator, is to point your consciousness, if you like, and your emotion and your energy toward the spoke of the wheel that you wanted. All the other ones still exist. And that's really important as well, probably for the next bit of the conversation. So you did that one, and then another nugget, and I do this 3 years ahead and 3 years behind. In you know, it's my habit. Is that because time is simultaneous, the you that broke down on the motorway exists, the you that walked in the door exists at the same time, and the you that walked in the door sent positive, I call it positive, sent information and positive emotion to that one to make it easier for this one to walk in the door. Oof, and that's where people's mind probably just exploded. But that's what it can be. I think that's the beauty of this magical approach and all that stuff, is that it folds in on itself. So yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that and that does work. You know, I have felt information come back from my future self on one particular occasion very strongly, and made a different decision based on that information. So yeah, so it does work. Okay, great. All right, so if anyone is watching this on YouTube and you've got any comments or anywhere else, just type below, like, really, how does that work, whatever, type it below and we'll check it out. Okay, great. So yeah, I think that sums up where we're at so far.
Yes, I think that's very good. It's good because I think bouncing it back between us, it clarifies for everyone else and for ourselves. And it's interesting because I've been using this technique for many, many years, and it just makes your life so much easier, you know. And you feel much more empowered by the whole thing. Instead of it all being random out there, you actually know that these things already exist. Therefore, you're just tuning into them, and you get better and better at it. And I mean, I tried to begin with, I would try very short little things and very easy things. I mean, for example, when I was in the Himalayas with my wife, and we did a lot of long distance trekking. We were out for weeks and weeks at a time, and we would come up to a lot of very, very high passes. And it was extremely difficult coming up. We had a lot of luggage, and we were sort of gasping for air, and we were just like, oh God, you know, this is really hard. And what we would do was we knew that the pass was probably maybe half an hour away. We would send or ask for energy from our future selves who had arrived at the path at the top and were looking at the view and saying how wonderful it was. Just, could you just send us a little bit of energy back? And we would actually feel that energy coming. And then we arrived at the top of the pass. We'd say, okay, we're going to send energy back to those selves a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And it was a lovely experiment. And you, after a while, because I think it's quite good to experiment with things that aren't sort of actually sort of
life-threatening.
Exactly.
But I
And then
think
you
that
get,
what my experience of that is not on the Alps, but it's with the exchange of energy and the building of energy that happens, that feels internally to me, where I feel stronger, physically, but also emotionally and energetically more supported. Because as I think what happens in my experience eventually is, you once you realize that you're in a safe universe, you can create a safe universe and that it's safe for you. That allows a certain level of buoyancy, that you can lean into reality a little bit and go, you know what, okay, I'm okay. But I think once you begin to do this and realize that one has the power to do this and that it's real, that adds another level of support, for me, on top of the, and it's incredibly reassuring to realize, of course, that all probabilities exist now, and therefore I imagine it's sometimes like an orange. If you peel an orange and you've got a segment of the orange, I imagine that my role is to choose the segment of the orange that I want, and simply ignore the others. And I find that works well in terms of creating, choosing that probability. But yeah, that ebb and flow of energy is cool. But we don't all have to go to the Alps unless
no,
we want to.
or the Himalayas or
Or the
wherever.
Himalayas, wherever.
It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
I found that was a very good. I think because it was so physically difficult,
Yeah.
and we were really just like, it was just wonderful to feel that energy coming back and to open to. And of course, you're in this amazing place anyhow, so physically. So it's. I think perhaps I was more open to kind of uh, that kind of help than I would have been in sort of my ordinary life. I
Yeah.
do find because I do well normally, but not now because of COVID, but in previous times, and hopefully again in the so-called future, I will be traveling again. And that to me is a real example of how, or it shows it more clearly to me, because when you're traveling in the way that I do, there's so many decisions and so many kind of so-called chance events. Um, and the last journey I went on, I was away in Europe for about 2 months, and it was the most perfect trip I've ever had, because I just seemed to be at the right place at the right time. I just seemed to make the right decisions. Of course, I mean, they weren't right or wrong decisions, but they were beneficial. I felt I had really good experiences, and I met really interesting people, and I just loads of doors opened and things happened, and it was a wonderful experience. And I think that's a really good analogy for life. When you start to tune into um, these more expansive probabilities, it kind of leads you to other situations, other places, other people, and then there's a kind of a flow in your life, and that builds a kind of momentum. Um, Even though you're recreating it, obviously, in the moment, there is a feeling of increased energy, which I think is
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's interesting. We haven't known each other that long at all in terms of time. But we have very similar experiences of the use of energy, and I always find that almost reassuring. Because a lot of the time we find we're doing this stuff on our own and we're logging down what it feels, whatever. But there certainly is a strong commonality in it, and I think this builds on the last conversation where we're looking at how your beliefs, so the beliefs that you have. So in order to create something as seamless as you're talking about, and obviously wasn't like you weren't floating on a cloud when you were traveling or whatever, and the projects I'm working on at the minute, aren't seamless. But I think that the thing that really helps is to get your beliefs in line with how you want it to come out, if you like, and focus on the outcome, and then bolt on this understanding that that probability already exists, and then begin to take the journey, toward it, reach out towards that goal. And I think that the two things together begin to build a picture of reality that's vastly different. It's much more exciting, much more fun as well. And I think there's a level of ease that goes with that when you know by experience, not just through theory, that this stuff works. And yeah, that's why it's kind of so exciting. So we've kind of we kind of talked about the future in a way, haven't we? So we talked about the time is simultaneous. It's a product of our mind, but outside our mind, there are other events that we do not perceive that we would call past and future, as well as limitless other ones we'll talk about on another talk, obviously. But the past is one that people do really wrestle with. So if we're on a spokes in a moment point, of course, I'm going to, I kind of see the probabilities before me, but actually from the moment point, you can also change the past probabilities, because of course that is also happening at the same time. And that's something that, I mean, that's another leap, isn't it? But it's one that I've experienced not as many times as in the future one, but certainly I have changed a physical symptom from the past, and also events where I was talking to somebody else and I changed the outcome of those events that so-called happened in the past. And I think that's an even more mind-blowing thing, isn't it? Because we just think that the past is dead and gone and can't be changed.
Yes, and I really agree with you. I think a very good way to kind of get so-called proof of that, well, not really proof, but just a better, is when you're with somebody else and you've experienced an event in the past, and you tell them what happened, and they say, no, that didn't happen. This happened. And you're kind of going, well, I remember this happening. And they say, no, it happened this way. And actually, I think this is a very good example of how each individual has different probable pasts, and that they change almost seamlessly without us realizing it. And I think people tend to sort of belabor the point. But I think when I hear people recounting a past event and it's being totally different, I think, yeah, that's a really good, example of how the past is actually different and how it changes.
And how we each have our own. I mean, this is the next part of the conversation, isn't it? Which is how we each have our own probable past that's in fact totally different to even our partners or our children's probable past. And that leads to this next mind-blowing kind of step, which is to realize that there's not just one world. I don't know if you want to take that leap today, but it, that there are probable, just as we have probable events individually, we create and experience our own events. Then obviously that means the only way to get your head around, well, how does it work with people, which is the big challenge for a lot of people, isn't it? It's like, how does that work with people? Is that we actually all have our own completely individual probable lives that seamlessly interact with other probabilities and other people, but actually we only experience our own. There's not just one world, one God, one reality. There is as many realities as there are probabilities.
Yes. So what you see when we walk into a room and what I see when we walk into the room, we sort of basically agree. There's a sort of tacit agreement, but it's all completely different. The significance of it, what would stand out for you and what would stand out for me would probably be quite different. And there would be memories and there would be, other associations and all the rest of it. So yes, I think we live within separate realities, but we have enough in common that there is this is why it's called camouflage reality, because it all seems to more or less, but oftentimes it doesn't. And people will say these things, and those are the times to really look out and go, well, wait a minute, so that isn't quite it's sort of like a glitch in the matrix,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so if we come back to that, so this idea that when we walk into a room, how many rooms are there? And there are as many rooms as there are people in the room. We create because our senses are forming the reality that we're experiencing, just like it does time. So that means that I'm perceiving my reality. So if we were to walk into a room together, which we will after COVID at some point, we'll walk into a pub, maybe we'll walk into
Yes,
a pub,
yes,
walk
yes.
into a pub, you know, and we'll actually see two completely different pubs, although we have a psychic agreement at other levels of what it looks like and that type of thing. But actually we have our own unique, literally unique experience of it. And that's an example of a probability. You know,
Yes.
we have our own probable reality. And of course, that takes us on to things like the nature of consciousness and the nature of the soul, doesn't it? Which I'm not sure if we want to talk about today. I think we might want to extend it, but should we just dip into that and then come back to some real practical applications of this? I think maybe that would, because otherwise we could head off
Yes.
into so that's where it takes us, this idea of that the soul isn't this singular thing, that has a life, goes up to heaven, back down, and all the rest of it. That is blown out of the water. That the soul is
Yes.
multi-dimensional. Yeah, which is a very different version of the nature of the soul, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing about what we're talking about, the nature of time and multidimensional reality. I mean, it's such a vastly different way of looking at everything. And I know what you mean. It's so easy to go off on a tangent and to kind of, in a way, gets quite overwhelmed by it. So I think one needs to start gently with it. Just take it easy to begin with.
Because it's almost like the logical explorations that have taken me a lifetime to go, oh, that means this and that means this and that, and then to go and experience them. Of course, if people try and take that on board, it's like a little psychic, not bombs, or I don't want to say it in a negative, but psychic awareness is going, really? You got really, and it's just it's a massive thing to take on board, that the reality we experience isn't physical, which we've kind of touched on in the last one. But then I think if we take out the idea of time, what we haven't touched on is of rather than the soul consciousness, but the fact is, what does that mean about our identity? Who is David? Who is, given that time is simultaneous, am I the same person that walked in the door earlier? Well, the answer is no. It's completely different me. But then what does that mean about our identity as a human being? Just to start that off, that can be a challenge.
Yes. And I mean, I think that's why I think it's always very important to try and remain grounded within this whole idea, because you don't want to just sort of get so overwhelmed that you just lose the plot, basically. And I've always felt that I want to remain. I mean, I have chosen, and this is another thing as well. I mean, I believe that I chose this particular incarnation as Robb, and I believe that, that I actually, before I incarnated, chose this particular time period. I chose whether I was going to be male or female, and I had a rough plan. So I think each lifetime is, well, I suppose we're getting into another thing now, which is all of these I can't help it.
Well, the challenge is once you begin to build this picture about reality not being physical, then you then begin to go, oh, what does that mean about time? Or what does that mean about space? Because of course space is also a creation of the senses. It's not really real in that way. So you go, oh, what does that? So even things like, well, what does that mean? Am I short-sighted? Do I need glasses? Do you know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff, and do I need to age? Don't I need to age? And then, of course, you begin to use this stuff and you feel, wow, I actually feel really, the timber, if you like, my psychic timber is strengthening, and I feel I can sense more of it. But of course, it just builds on itself. And I think the key is, as you say, is not to lose the practice. I'm immensely practical. I'm a skeptic by nature. I really am, which is how I got to this in the first place. But I think, it has to be usable and practical You know, so maybe on the next talk, we'll talk about the multidimensional nature of the soul and consciousness. But I think here we can just really focus on this idea of, you know, what does that mean for us as human beings if time is simultaneous? So maybe you've got a couple of it. So one example is that you can send energy to and from different portions of yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I think that's it's a very practical thing to be able to tune into. I mean, I think also you can, by doing exercises to contact the inner self, you can actually go into that simultaneous time, and actually get more of an understanding about what the probabilities might be. And I think another thing which we probably need to have a big chat about at some stage is the whole role of dreams in this, because I feel that in the dream reality, I mean, I believe that, you know, a lot of what we experience in physical reality is actually decided upon and worked on in the dream space, experimented with, and then brought into actuality in physical reality. So that dream reality is very much outside of linear time, and everyone will have had this experience. Probably, if anyone remembers their dreams, you know, they will find that in some dreams they're much younger, some dreams they're much older, some dreams, you know, the whole time thing isn't nearly as linear as it appears. And I think that's another very important place where you can actually experience, get outside of the linear time frame. But also, I think when you're doing a kind of meditation, or when you're doing something that you really love, time often just disappears. You know, you kind of go, oh, you look at the watch and you see that so much time has passed, but in your experience, you were so wrapped up in it that time just kind of disappeared. So
yeah, I mean, I just like to say at that point, there's a nice phrase, you know, which is that for me, I enjoy, which is that time and events aren't the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just because we experience events doesn't mean we experience time. Because a lot of people, if I'm talking to people, go, yeah, but what about this event? You know, and they're actually two completely separate things, because because time is subjective, and because of that, events are subjective. So as you say, you know, you could be doing. I was doing some coloring the other day for, you know, just to chill out. And Claire said, "Oh, let's color in a mandala and all that." So, you know, just, you know, sitting there the other day, just chilling out, and so that as an event seemed to take very little time. However, other events seem to take more time, and it's that the event, our experience of the event, is constructed differently. And I think that's, the more you can recognize that, the more you start to see the differences. But you've got to acknowledge them first, and then you start to see the differences, I think.
Yes, I think ultimately, you know, what we're exploring here today, it all helps with freedom within our physical life. It enables us to expand and do things, instead of being sort of imprisoned by these concepts of linear time and karma and all of these other things. As you let go of them, it sort of allows a whole other kind of energy, another perception, and a kind of flow to happen that couldn't have happened when you believe these things were rock bed reality. It's about realizing there's a much more flexibility and fluidity in our lives.
Yeah.
And yet again, coming back to what we said last time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, sorry, you've gone slightly out of focus there. But I think so if we just come back to that for a second, I think one of the good things some people can do is have a look at this idea of what are their beliefs about time. And so we could say, you know, that time is a core belief. You know, we believe in it generally. It's generally accepted to be true. And to take up on the point you mentioned, which is, just to paraphrase it slightly, is that while you believe in time, you deny yourself all the other experiences that are naturally available. And so if one can say, okay, I'm going to suspend, I know I have events, but I'm going to suspend my belief in the effects of time, you know, and do that over, you know, just try and make that an experience within people, within their lives. I think what my experience of that working with other people is that that's when it allows other experiences to kind of peek into their reality that wouldn't be available otherwise. And so core beliefs, I think, are really important about time. So things like aging, things like cause and effect, things like karma. And if you're watching this now, I've done it, Rob may have done it, you know, this idea of just write down all your beliefs about time and how it affects you. And then imagine if you could remove all of those, what comes through, in my experience, is something much more empowering and fluid and flexible. You're back on now. You're all good.
Oh,
Zoom is
good,
working
good.
perfectly well. Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
so that would be a practical thing I would suggest maybe people could do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think those are very, 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 very good things. I think anything that can just sort of, just in a way, jolt the fixedness of reality, because I think one can get so sort of hypnotized by, you know, the seeming solidity of everything. And I think when you move that a bit and you just sort of alter your perspective, it just allows for other things to open up, and it can be so magical and it just fantastic when that does happen.
I mean, even things like I have had experiences, and I know other people have believed that because they're a certain age, that they don't have the energy, or they're going to fall apart and all that type of thing. So I did some work with some people purposely who are technically in their minds older, but of course we come to reality fresh in every minute. So, and actually by changing, just like say, jolting their ideas, like it's like putting a little not as strong as a taser, but a little shortcut, you know, a little charge into their thinking. And actually, they found that they felt revitalized, they felt stronger. Do you know what I mean? That they were more lucid, and they felt more motivated, and that is because obviously they removed their ideas around time and allowed their natural timelessness to kind of to come through, you know, and I thought that was great, you know, something I try and practice obviously as well.
Yeah, I've actually been working on that quite a lot in the last year or so. And it's been very interesting because I mean, I don't think we've talked about mass beliefs yet, but I think there is another time. But I mean, there are not only individual beliefs, but there are mass beliefs held by society. And one of the mass beliefs is that as you age, you know, things will deteriorate, you know, you are more liable to get disease and all the rest of it. And I think particularly with the COVID pandemic, that's becoming stark reality. You know, people are told if you're over a certain age, you're more susceptible, which
Yeah,
of course is just a belief. It's not a fact, you know.
very self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah.
Yes, but I really had to work on that, and I also this thing about getting older. Um, but as I've worked on it, and as I've really made sure refine beliefs about my health, my vibrancy, my energy, I've noticed that perhaps I don't do things the same as I did when I was younger, but when I do them, I do them with a kind of a joyfulness and intensity, and that things that seemed like they ought to take longer suddenly don't seem to be taking so long, and I seem to have more time, which is obviously, you know, because the belief has changed and because there's been a flexibility there, and it's very, very interesting. It's very interesting.
I think it's I think we'll round it off in a second and we'll just summarize where we're at. But I do think if um, I think if we leap, you know, we're just at the leading edge of this now, you know, and I think it's going to be really amazing, and we'll see it from another perspective, not a physical perspective, but another perspective. You know, say in terms of time, in terms of you know, in 2040, whatever that's happening simultaneously, although we can't experience it. it will be amazing to see the nature of health of people, you know, because of course this is becoming more and more accepted, even though we're just at the tip of the iceberg right now, you know. It'll be amazing to think that this is taught in schools, you know, that science will ratify completely that time is a construct, and therefore you don't have to, you know, you may change, but you don't have to get old, you know. It's going to be amazing to see the differences, you know, in it. And yeah, I wish I'd knew before I lost my hair, but that's another subject, you know. So but there you go. Yeah, so brilliant. I think we've kind of got the nub of it, I think. So what would you say to round off? Of course, we came in to talk about the simultaneous nature of time, what that means, and then how to practically apply that in life. So how would you round it off?
Well, I think, I mean, probably the best way, the best thing, come back to the practicality of it is to just sit with that idea to begin with, just to entertain that idea, and that is something that is worth just thinking about, and try some of the future self little exercises just in a very playful way, see if they work. Just play around with those concepts, and just stay with that idea that, you know, we live in a multidimensional and simultaneous time is actually what's really going on in the larger reality. And I think that's probably what I would say to people. And keep asking questions, and we will try to answer them if you ask us. And also, we'll be doing some more discussions, continuing on with this, probably going into it in more depth at some point as well.
Yeah. I think it's yeah. So I think that's perfect. I think the idea is just to be playful, make it practical. You know, make it more than a theory. That's what I would say. A lot of people, you know, and often people find themselves busy. You know, they find themselves in situations where they might not feel as though that this is a worthwhile exploration. You know, but I think if they can be open to that, what they will sense coming through is much more of themselves. You know, they will get an actual sense of the freedom that they have, and the more they play with it, the better they'll get at it. So I think that's it. Okay, so brilliant. So thank you very much. I think that was great. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of really good stuff. So if you are watching on YouTube right now, we're going to be doing more of this. So please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. If you're on podcast, I hope you enjoyed listening to it. And the next one I think we'll probably get into is the multidimensional nature of the soul, because that leads on fairly nicely to from where we started, which is how you create your own reality, to the nature of time and the effects of simultaneous nature of time. And that leads on again to the nature of consciousness and the soul. And that's what I think probably what we'll do next time. Yeah.
Great. And
Awesome.
thanks for listening or watching. And if it's been a little bit confusing, don't worry about it. We all get confused. I'm still a bit confused, and we'll slowly unravel this in our future talks. And thanks very
Exactly.
much, David.
Exactly. And it's not an accident that you're watching this either. So there we go. Okay. Thanks very much then, Rob. And we'll see you on the next video.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
bye for everyone.